Greetings, beautiful people, and welcome to the second episode of the Teaching Beyond the Barriers podcast, brought to you by the National Network of State Teachers of the Year. I'm your host, Dr. Richard Warren Jr., an award-winning educator, speaker, and professor, also known as R.H. Warren Jr. on social media. And we also have a co-host on today's episode, Brianna Ross. Brianna, tell the listeners a little bit about who you are, your role in education, a couple of your accomplishments as well.
Absolutely. Love and light to everybody gathered here. I am so excited to be in this space. My name is Brianna Ross. I am a teacher, a writer, educator, and advocate for children of the global majority. I'm a former history teacher, and I currently serve as a middle school administrator in Baltimore County, Maryland. So shout out to all my middle school family. I'm also a lifelong learner, so I'm working towards a doctorate. I'm trying to be like Dr. Warren one day. And I'm doing research to unearth the hidden stories in Black education, specifically in former colored schools in Maryland. I'm a California Casualty Teaching Excellence Awardee, NAACP Excellence in Education Awardee, and the 2022 Maryland Teacher of the Year. And you can find me on Twitter at Ms.
Brianna, we are thrilled that you are here. Listen, y'all are in for a treat. Special shout out to our sponsors from the NEA Foundation. This is the Teaching Beyond the Barriers podcast, a podcast for educators, by educators, where we transcend the limits and unlock the true potential of education. Today's episode focuses on the critical role of teachers advocating for a student affirming education with school and district leaders.
We are all teachers here, so we know what it means to do the work, the hard work, the painstaking work, the necessary work to ensure more success, better outcomes, and ultimately more equitable futures for our students. But not everyone knows or understands what that work looks like and even why that work matters. So as teacher leaders, what we are trying to figure out is how do we effectively communicate the importance of equity in education to school administrators like myself, district leaders like superintendents, and how can we ensure that our advocacy not only reaches but resonates with those who are at the helm of that decision
making. Want y'all to lock in and join us alongside of experienced educators John and Anthony. Listen, we're going to dive into the dynamics of these critical conversations. We're going to provide practical strategies, share personal experiences, and try to bridge that gap between the classroom realities and leadership perspectives. Our hope is to empower you with the tools and the confidence to influence school district leaders, policies, and ensure that every student receives the support and opportunities they deserve to thrive. Welcome to the Teaching Beyond the Barriers podcast, John and Anthony. It is so great to have you here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. So for those of you who may not know who they are, John and Anthony, I want you to tell the listeners who you are, your role in education, and a couple of your accomplishments as an educator. So we'll start with John, and then we'll go with Anthony.
Absolutely. My name is John Arthur. I am a 6th grade school teacher here in Meadowlark Elementary in Salt Lake City. It's a Title I elementary in a beautifully diverse, culturally rich neighborhood. I'm the 2021 Utah Teacher of the Year, and I was also a National Teacher of the Year finalist. And I am proud not only of my accomplishments in the classroom, but outside the classroom. I am the co-director of a nonpartisan nonprofit called the Teacher Fellows, where we are developing the next generation of Utah teacher leaders. I'm also the director of recruitment for the Utah National Board Coalition, as well as a board of directors member for the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards. It was easier to pass the test than to say the full name of the organization. And beyond that, I'm also, this is kind of a scoop. I'm giving you a little bit of insider information. I'm also going to run for state school board here in the state of Utah. I just filed my papers last week. I'm going to make the more formal announcement tomorrow. But as we talk about these issues that are affecting educators and students, I've decided I cannot simply post comments and record videos on social media any longer. I want a seat at the table. I want to vote on these things. So I'm throwing my hat into the political ring now as well.
That's awesome.
Yo, listen,
I'm following in Anthony's footsteps. He was already on the school board.
Man, look, that That's amazing, man.
Amazing.
So I'm glad that we got a chance to hear the info
You
first,
got it.
or
You got
partly
it.
first.
First here, absolutely.
Yeah.
Right, Anthony, tell us more about yourself.
Hey, everyone. My name is Anthony Swan. I'm a 17-year veteran in education. I currently serve as an assistant principal at Monterey Elementary in Roanoke, Virginia. I'm the 2021 Virginia Teacher of the Year. I'm an Impactors of Excellence Award winner from the NAACP. Um, I've also been able to be the first African American sitting teacher to sit on the State Board of Education. I was
Mm-hmm.
appointed by Governor Ralph Northam as a voting member. Um, and I'm just happy just to be here. I love serving kids. I've always wanted to do it since I was 11 years old. Um, and advocacy now it's you can say it's my middle name per se. Like whenever I see an injustice, like I want to speak up. I want to challenge those that are in leadership to help them to be reflective as well.
Man, listen, you all are in for a treat. I don't know if y'all heard.
I was gonna say, Dr. Warren, it's about to get a
Look,
little
I want
spicy,
it
I
all.
think.
Bring all of the nuggets, bring all of the gems, because I truly believe that our voices in this space is super important. And a lot of times, for people, for educators who are passionate and making sure that students get what they deserve, sometimes there's no roadmap for it. Sometimes it's like you feel sometimes isolated, or you feel alone. But I think it's something special with what we've have experienced as teachers of the year, and how we can help other people along the way, because we have somewhat of a blueprint. We have somewhat of a roadmap. And so the roadmap might not be as clear, but I think we do have something to give other teacher leaders and other um, people who want to advocate. We have something to give them speed. So things that took us years to
Mm-hmm.
understand, we can give it to them in a couple of weeks, or
Yeah.
in a couple of nuggets, or in a couple of sentences, right? So my question to start off for you all is, can you give us like a blueprint or a roadmap, so to speak, to effectively advocate for student affirming education with school boards and district leaders? Any of
You
y'all?
I'll jump in. I'll
Yeah.
jump in. It's interesting when you talk about the idea of a roadmap, right? Something that you can just reliably follow and it'll take you to the destination you want to go to. I don't know that I would say that I have a roadmap, but what I do have are checkpoints or markers on the road, and also things that I have packed in the car that are reliable. That if I get into trouble, I can always fall back on. So when I'm talking to a school or district leader, and I am trying to advocate for these student affirming practices, for creating an environment in my classroom that I know is going to take care of kids, I know that I can always fall back on personal stories, anecdotes from the classroom that
Yeah.
don't just show but really paint a beautiful picture of why we need to take care of all our kids and what we specifically need in order to do that, right? There's always some story that a human can connect to, whether they're a politician or a legislator or a school board member. They're still humans at heart, and they really, I believe, got into whatever position they're in because they want to do some good. They want to help, and sometimes they just need professionals like us to show them what that help needs to look like in order to achieve the outcomes that they say that they want to see. So, for example, really quickly, right now my classroom, different from any other year that I've taught, is about a quarter newcomers to the country. I've got about a quarter of my kids don't speak English. And when I have been trying to get resources into my classroom, I've been saying, I need this, I need that. And I've struggled to get the things that I'm looking for. But when I start to tell people, I've got this kid from Venezuela who just showed up and he's scared and he cannot communicate and he doesn't know how to let me know what he needs. That's why I want these translator earbuds that can just go into my ear and I can hear in English what he's saying in Spanish, so I can take better care of this scared child. Then they say, "Oh, absolutely. Let's make that thing happen," because they remember what it felt like to be a scared child too. they're a parent with a scared child at home, and they can connect with the why behind what it is I'm asking for.
Man, okay.
I love that John. I think it's so important that we like really highlight the
Mm-hmm.
importance of stories. I mean, I know, and Anthony, I want you to respond as well. And I know that there's all kinds of ways to do this, right? And to communicate this effectively, like how do we ensure student affirming education? But what we also know is that everybody
Mm-hmm.
understands stories. Everybody can understand the humanity in each other, right? And sometimes we have to appeal to politicians that way. As just like a follow up for both of you, how have you used your own story as a student, as a teacher, as a leader in advocacy, in this advocacy work? What does it look like to incorporate your story in that?
I'll jump in. From my perspective, I went through a lot as a kid, and so now what I do is I challenge people that, especially those that are privileged, that that have never went through anything or have never experienced childhood traumas while still trying to come to school and learn. Um, just challenging them to to put themselves in the shoes of their children. Like, what if it was you? Like, what if you were tired? You're not going to want to learn where you need to sleep. Allow the kid to sleep. You don't have to write them up because they're sleeping in class. They're human. Attend to their humanistic needs first. And then once you do that, that builds that relationship with them, and it causes for them to want to perform for you. And so just, I would say as well, like, be confident in who you are as an educator. I remember sitting at the state board meetings, and some of my first meetings, I was so intimidated because there was doctors, there were lawyers, there were people who had doctorate degrees, and I'm just sitting there in my mind. I'm saying, I'm only a teacher, like they're not going to listen to me. But then something stood up in me as if to say, you're at this table for a reason, speak up. And so with some of the superintendents, some of the policies that were coming across the desk, I kept speaking up. And I remember one superintendent, after our meeting, the superintendent at the state level came to me, and she was like, Mr. Swan, I've never been challenged like you challenged me, and you caused me to think about other things, and I appreciate that. Because we're making these policies and we're making these things without having someone at the table that's on the front lines.
Mm.
So you need someone that's going to be there to say, no, that's not what we're dealing with right now as teachers. That's not what we're going through. That's not what administrators are going through as well. That's not what our children are going through. Like, you need someone that's going to be able to challenge uh, leadership to cause them to be reflective, because we're not always right. And if you want to make sure that you're advocating for kids, make sure that they are at the forefront of every decision, before, not what parents want, not what you think is best for this one particular sect of children. No, what
Mm-hmm.
about all children? So
Mm-hmm.
the I would just say, just make sure that you are confident in who you are, and stand up and being an educator.
Yeah.
And we know that in Utah, John's going to be the
Look,
one who sits
I'm
at the
telling
table.
you.
So
Look,
we're
I
good over
think I
there.
think it's beautiful to see different and hear different perspectives on this. As far as, like, Anthony, you talk about, we have to reach the heart before we can get to the head, right? John, you talk about, like, the power of personal stories, but
Mm-hmm.
also how to use that to influence policy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's this fine balance of, okay, we got to know what the policies are, right? But we also have to be able to make it in a down to earth, here's the reality of teaching, here's a story that goes with this policy,
Mm-hmm.
and how it can either positively or negatively impact the lives of our students or the lives of our
Yep.
educators, which will indirectly impact the lives of our students, right? And so I
Yep.
think it's that fine balance of, okay, I need to look at these policies, but I also need to
Mm-hmm.
have a personal story or a personal connection, or know someone who has a personal story or personal connection to this policy. And I got to be able to reach their heart, and I got to be able to strip away, in a sense, some of the noise or some of the inadequate or inadequately represented data around this topic and really get to the
Mm-hmm.
heart of the matter. I think that's so important. And I think that is checkpoints instead of a roadmap. So here's some checkpoints, right? We got to start having these stories. We got to look at the policies. We got to make sure that when we're explaining these things, that we reach the humanistic side of what we're trying to accomplish. And then we got to be
Yes.
confident in that, right? We got to be
Mm-hmm.
confident knowing that when we say what we say, we mean what we say. And at the end of the day, is not any harm that's being spread towards the person in front of us, but we're just trying to make sure that what we have in the future is much better than where it is now. So I
Right.
definitely appreciate that.
Definitely.
And Dr. Warren, and thinking about that too, because what you're saying is what we're really trying to get at is how do we get other people who are not in the classroom, who are not doing the work, to understand not only the realities of what teachers are experiencing, the realities of what students are experiencing, and really see into the humanity of them, right? But you both know, all of us know that even that, sometimes in telling the stories and presenting the hard, whether it's I got to get to your heart and give you the trauma filled story, or let me give you the data that shows you that this isn't working. What does it look like for you when it's still not working, right? When that kind of advocacy, to get into the heart, get into the head, how do you navigate these challenges when you're still meeting resistance when trying to discuss student affirming education, when trying to discuss equity? Because some people simply just don't believe in it. Some people just don't want to hear it no matter what you say. How do you navigate that, not just in terms of your advocacy and what you're trying to do for students, but even at the personal level? Because I know that sometimes it just hurts. Like my
Mm.
feelings be hurt sometimes when it's like they don't get it. Like they don't understand what my students are experiencing. Like why don't they understand, right? And I'm like in my feelings about it, right? So how do you navigate that? Not just in terms of like I got to continue the work, but like not getting burnt out and bogged down by the real hard lines of like some people just don't want to hear the message.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to hear the story. How do you guys navigate those
I'll
situations?
jump in on that. For me, I don't know about you, Bree, but leading adults can be very hard, and I'm speaking from an administrator point of view. Like, you could say this,
Anthony, we could talk
listen,
all
like,
day about
you
it.
could say the
All
same
day.
thing over and over, and still you would think it's the children, but sometimes it's the adults. So, what I have to do, and what my principal is also training me, so I can have my own building, is that when things like that happen, I can't take it personal. And I have to, like today, I literally had to go in my office and just take a deep breath and just continue and realize my purpose. Um, Not sure who you all pray to, but to the higher beings, just pray. My prayer every morning for myself as well as my wife, because she's is an educator, is help us to remember our purpose. So when we are challenged, we will still have that fire behind us to know that we're there for those children. You know, Regardless of what you're doing, regardless of how you feel, regardless of how you disagree with me, I am here because I am here to serve children, not, past all of that. And that's what helps me. And sometimes it's exhausting. It can be rather exhausting, but just to know that one day that child is going to turn around and say thank you. It helps me to keep going because I know that my impact is going to reach generations that I haven't even met. And so that's what helps me to continue to keep going, is not to take it personal and to remember my purpose, which is to serve those children. Sometimes when people won't hear you as the adult, I think that it's also good to have children or student voice. So students need to be able to sit at the table as well and say, this is how this affected me. This is how it made me feel. I remember earlier this school year, I had a situation and it really flustered me. And when I went to the table to challenge some leaders, I had I had gotten my student voices together. I had them to write letters so that they can see this is just not me. Look at how it's affecting. And anyone that wants to do what's best for children we'll listen to student voice.
No doubt.
Uh,
You guys may see me like jotting stuff down over here. It's just because listening to all of you, and especially just now my boy Anthony, who, I've gotten to listen to this guy for years now. I never get sick of it. And you guys are just bringing to mind a couple of things for me. One, when you're talking about people who don't want to hear, there's always a reason why. There's a person, a beating heart inside of that hard shell that is either hurt or scared or just done. They've been through it, and happy people don't react that way. Open people don't react that way. So if you can, the same way that you do with a child in your classroom, take a moment to take that breath, like Anthony described, and then again in your mind humanize this person that you're dealing with, and try to figure out what it is that roadblock in their mind or in their heart, and not only try to activate their heart, but repair it in some way, build trust as not just opponents in a conversation, but members of the same community, and recognize that at the end of the day, we all have the same goal, which is helping their child. Because usually it's a parent or someone in the community who is worried about their kid. They're operating from a place of scarcity, right? Whether it's a scarcity of resources. If this kid over here gets more, then my kid's gonna have to get less, and I can't have that. Or it's a moral scarcity where it's like I've only got so much love and care to give, and I can't give beyond my child right now. We as teachers, we have this requirement, this beautiful professional need to take care of all kids, and we have a different lens that we're coming from. They're just staring just right at their child, and fully motivated to take care of that one person. So if we can have these conversations where we say, tell me why it is that you don't care about student affirming education. Why is it that you say things like you don't want to hear anything more about this? What is it that you've heard that has turned you off so much? And if you wouldn't mind, if we could have a conversation about that, I would love it. And start building a bridge towards that outcome that we're hoping to build a map toward. Um, the other thing that I just want to throw in real quick is no one can stop me from affirming the children in my classroom, right? At the end of the day, I close that door. I'm going to do the things I know are right by the children in my room. So, those generations that Anthony's talking about, I know I'm going to take care of them. What I'm worried about is all the other kids who are out there in all these other classrooms, and they need teachers who are protected by policies, who are pushed to be more affirming for their kids. I know that the rock stars, we're going to do the things that we know are right, but that's not good enough if we're trying to heal our society and mend these wounds that are leading to these school board meetings that are getting shouted down and all the other contention that we see right now. We need to push our elected officials to create policies that trust educators again rather than try and keep us from going too far. We need to have things that are, I don't know, pushing the system obviously in the direction that we all wanted to go, but at the same time that we do that, not hold grudges against the people who are telling us that they don't want to hear what we have to say, because it's just like the old saying goes, holding a grudge is like drinking poison and hoping it kills the other person, right? We can't keep doing that to ourselves, because that's one of the reasons why we're losing so many beautiful educators and not moving the ball forward for our children.
Man, look, I feel like um, I forget who it was, and it kind of brought it back to my reality when I heard Brook for you speak. Um, I was a school leader, and he says he does two things with his staff every school year. He gives them a pacifier, and and he gives them a hospital patient bracelet. And he says to them, he says, "Look, I'm giving you this pacifier because I want you to remember that you are dealing with someone else's baby."
Mm-hmm.
And he says, "I'm giving you this hospital bracelet to realize is that everybody in here is a patient." And I want you to remember this when you face resistance, when you face challenges, that no matter what, you have to remember that that little boy, that little girl is someone else's baby. You have to remember that this little boy, this little girl is a patient, and they're looking for a sense of safety, a sense of healing, a sense of belonging, and they want genuinely to make sure that they're in the best position. And sometimes that shows up in different ways. And someone also told me that as a teacher, in the times of resistance, in the times of challenges, that we have to turn on our teacher cape or our teacher brains, because the same way we treat our students and we try to be student affirming with them, we try to get to the root causes with them, we try to differentiate instructions with them, we put together these tier behavioral systems with them, right? The same thing that we've learned over the years of how to deal with kids. It's crazy. Build relationships and all of those things is the same concept we got to deal with district leaders, um, policymakers, politicians. It's like when we got that challenging student, it's not just going to be one conversation that wins them over, right? Sometimes it is. Sometimes you can
Mm-hmm.
get that one teachable moment. Sometimes it works that way. But most of the
Yeah.
time, it takes you going back to the drawing board. You met with resistance. You got to try a new strategy. You go back to the drawing board. You got to call parent. You got it's so many different things. And what I think I liked about what you said, Anthony, is at the end of the day, you have to realize that your voice might not be the only voice they need to hear. Like, it's okay to get a victory by tapping into other voices. I'm gonna say that again. It's okay to get a
Mm-hmm.
victory by tapping into other voices. It is, we don't have to do this in isolation. It's the collective sometimes that reminds of, okay, if my voice didn't get it, maybe someone else's voices can get it. You know,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
maybe someone else might be able to talk. Maybe they might need to see this from a different perspective. You know, regardless of the person, I want you to get the perspective. I'm just a messenger,
Mm-hmm.
right? In a
Mm-hmm.
sense. And
Yep.
so there's so many other messengers and ways to do it. So I appreciate both of those perspectives. And it really rang true to me on that. So just wanted to mention that.
I also just want to say too, and I have to come back to this, John, because I think we know there are teachers listening, and I think for the teachers who are just like Anthony said, going to those first board meetings and are like, I'm intimidated by
Sure.
everybody else in this room. What am I even doing here? But scratch and claw and trying to just make change. I think the important part is that the important message from you, John, is they are doing the right work no
Mm-hmm.
matter what. Because when they go
Mm-hmm.
in that classroom and they are with those kids, that is where those kids are being seen and loved and heard and affirmed and valued. Even if when you step into that board meeting, no one is doing that for them, we know it's happening in the classroom. And I think it's so important for teachers to stay true to that work too. That the work that happens in the classroom is the most important advocacy work that there is. There is no greater advocacy work than what we do with our students and for our students every single day. And as an administrator, Anthony, too, and just you are 100% right. Sometimes it is the adults more than anything, and I think staying headstrong on that we do
Mm-hmm.
this work for students, and even if it's just this one student in front of me right now, and that's where that work is, and that's where the radical work is happening. I think that's so important and so critical for teachers to hear and
Yeah.
to remember. So thank you for elevating that in this space because the work
Mm-hmm.
is exhausting. The work is tiring. I've been talking to teachers so much who are bogged down, especially for in some places around the country, they are the only person doing the work
Mm.
in their school, in their district, in their right. And so it's important to remember with Central, but I also want to highlight that we do get victories, right? Whether it's through our voice or the voices of someone else. And so I'm curious to hear from both of you about what are some of the victories that you have experienced in this advocacy work. Are there any things or any stories you can share with us where your advocacy really has positively impacted policy or practice, whether it's at your local school level, at a district level? I really want to hear about the victories that you guys have
I'll
had.
share one. It was actually a couple of years ago. Um, so I was actually an instructional coach at a middle school, and there was this one particular student who was just having a hard time, but the principal recognized, that he needed like a balance system for him to get things done, and he loved basketball. So the principal sent out this email to his teachers, and I was on it because I was the instructional coach. and telling his teachers like, when this student finishes his work, he's allowed to go play basketball, kind of like as a give and take. And this one particular teacher writes the principal back, and it was a really nasty email, and she says, I don't think it's right. My daughter don't get to go do such and such. When she's doing her work, it's not right. I need somebody to give me a research-based answer on why this should be incorporated. And she's talking to the principal this way. And I wrote back and I replied all, and I put research in it how, and I kind of reminded her, even as a parent, you don't give all your children the same thing. You give them what they need for them to feel loved, for them to feel affirmed. And I put some research in there. And then I went to the principal, and the principal was like, I asked him, I was like, was I out of line? And he was like, absolutely not. But I made that teacher rethink how she was thinking. The student still got what he needed. He was still able to play basketball. But I challenged that teacher's thinking to let her know, you're coming from a privileged space right now. Like, this student, this is what he needs. So in order for him to be successful in your class, why not allow this to happen? Um, that was a victory for me, because this was a teacher who bucked everything. And for me to be able to challenge her thinking with research based answers, it kind of made me feel good, because it let me know that no, this is what's going to happen, and this is what should happen. And if you continue to challenge, I'm going to challenge you. And the guidance, even the guidance counselors, thanked me for speaking up for this particular student as well. That's one of mine. But John, I'll let you jump in.
I'll just share real quick. Before I became a candidate running for the state school board, I've been an advisor to my state school board for quite a while. I was on an advisory committee representing the Asian community here in Utah on different policies, and we were able in 2020 to push our state school board to put forward a resolution denouncing racism and embracing student affirming education in our classrooms. But I also was on the writing committee for our new social studies standards, K to 6. And it was very important to me as an educator of color, as a kid who grew up here in Salt Lake City with not a ton of diversity to look at, that I help our committee put in standards that would elevate and uplift the communities of kids that we have in our classrooms today. And I was able to write a standard and eventually get it through with a lot of conversations with very right wing or Republican state school board members who, again, by humanizing them and having human conversations, were able to get down with what it was that we were trying to do. Write a standard in fifth grade US history where the students have to research and report on the accomplishments and contributions of a minority community in the United States. And I wanted it to go further. This was kind of the balance we were able to strike. But when people would ask me, why are we writing a standard just for people who come from a minority community? Why are we excluding so many of our students? Even they could get down with the understanding that all the other standards were for them. And we needed at least one doorway, one entry point, not just for kids to share the accomplishments and contributions of their own communities, but for all kids to have the beautiful opportunity to learn about the places and the people their classmates come from, and also to understand truly the story of us when we're looking at history and civics, how we got to this moment here together, and how remarkable it is that we've made so many strides in the last 70, 80 years, but also understanding how much farther we have to go. And by affirming students in our classrooms and teaching them the playbooks of the champions who came before, suddenly they are more capable of seeing themselves as the champions we need now, and start to understand not only their responsibility to their community, to their family, and to our country at large, but how you make change happen. And while I want to be a change maker out there in society and in education, I recognize that my best work is done in here as a trainer of champions. And I look at my kids very much through that lens. All the work that we do together, I tell them on the first day of school, I don't teach children, I train champions. I'm counting on you to do better than I ever did.
Mm, that's a
That's
that.
dope.
Oh, I
I
like
like
that one.
that.
Oh, I
Yeah,
like
me
that
too.
one. Well, look, well, look. This episode has been phenomenal in terms of kind of giving teacher leaders and people, you know, the advice of how to speak about student affirming education to district leaders and school leaders. Is there one last word you would like to share regarding that topic, Anthony, either Brianna or John, regarding this topic that you want to leave listeners with? If you could just go ahead and share that.
I would just like to say, in your advocacy, just make sure that you're doing what's best for the students. Make sure that you don't have any type of microaggressions or biases that will hinder you from seeing something from another cultural lens. You know, you may disagree with the student's lifestyle, gender orientation, a student's background, whatever your disagreement is, you're allowed to have it. You're validated. However, you still cannot make a student not feel seen or not feel validated or included with any decision that you make. And so I would challenge you to make sure that you check your microaggressions because believe it or not, we all have them. And so that will be my last words. Just make sure that you are not being biased when it comes down to who you're going to serve.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I would just picking up on something that Anthony said earlier about how, when you're having a conversation with someone who's a policymaker, who's a leader in some way, asking them, like, what if it was you? I would just recommend that anytime that you can, like, don't make it about them. Don't sometimes even make it about your students if your students are so foreign to them that they can't actually empathize in an effective way that would move them to change a policy. I would always make it about their kid, right? What if this was your child? Because I've had conversations with adults where I said, "What, like, is this what you would want?" And they have this idea of themselves in their mind that isn't always true. Like, yeah, I would have pulled myself up by my bootstraps, and I could handle anything. I'm as tough as can be. I don't want anyone handing me anything. Blah 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 blah. And you say, what if your child was in a classroom and they needed this thing from their teacher, but their teacher wouldn't give it to them? How would you feel as the guardian of this human life, as the protector of your child? Blah blah blah. They suddenly, if you can actually get them to visualize their child in a moment of need, then suddenly they can look at a policy or a rule or a bill and say, there's a hole here. And if my child falls into it, they might get hurt. And they are more likely to fill in those gaps that we need them to fill if they get that it's about protecting their child too. And sometimes it's not about their child. Sometimes they come from a place where they're fine, they're good. But if you can even plant the visual in their brain, it might just haunt their dreams. It might just awaken their souls. And once it does, it could be weeks later, but it can have an impact on whatever it is that you need to change to make things better for your children.
Man, that's super powerful. Brianna, is there any last words? Are you thinking?
I'm just like so moved. John, you were taking notes. I was taking notes. I just am so moved by the insight that you both have, and also the work that you've both done. I'm grateful, knowing that the kids in Virginia, the kids in Utah, have you and have advocates. John, we already know you on the school board. We already claiming it. That's a victory
Yes,
for
Yes,
all.
I'll
That's a
tell
indeed.
victory for
everybody.
all of us. We
Thanks.
are
yes,
claiming.
gotcha.
Yes, we are claiming that for you. You heard it first on the Teaching Beyond the Barriers podcast on Arthur School Board. So thank you both for this
Yeah,
space.
it,
This
it
was
was so
amazing.
wonderful to hear your insight and amazing work. To learn more about John, you want to give him like your social media or where they can find
Please.
you?
Absolutely. You can find me as well as my students across platforms at Ninth Evermore, the number 9th Evermore. And also, very soon, please, by the time this airs, hop on votejohnarthur.com.
All right.
Yes.
All right. Let's
Yes.
go. Anthony, where can they find you at on social? At what?
At 2021vat.o.y, or you can find me on X at 2021vatOty.
All right. Brianna, where can they find you at?
Twitter at
All
Miss
right.
Ross.
Well, listen, thank you for joining us for the second episode of the Teaching Beyond the Barriers podcast. Remember, every conversation, every idea, and every step we take brings us closer to breaking down the barriers and unlocking the true potential of education. Meet us back in the Teaching Beyond the Barriers podcast for our next episode. Take care, everybody.